If your paycheck hits your bank account through direct deposit, 3 rules that changed recently are quietly deciding how much of that money you actually get to keep. Most people receiving direct deposits right now have no idea any of this is happening, and the reason you were never told is the exact same reason it keeps costing you. These aren't hypothetical risks or warnings about something that might happen someday. They are active right now and already being applied to accounts just like yours. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what changed and precisely what to do about it. Hey, I'm Lana Maines. I'm no expert, but I'm here to walk you through the financial information that actually protects your money and helps you keep more of what you earn. If that sounds useful to you, go ahead and subscribe, because I cover this kind of thing every single week. Let's start with why any of this is changing in the first place, because the context really matters. Direct deposit was originally built to be simple. Your employer or the federal government sends funds electronically. The money lands in your account and you use it. That was the model for decades. But 2 major developments broke that simplicity. The first was the rise of financial technology apps. Companies like Chime, Dave, and Cash App began offering early direct deposit access as a main selling point, advancing your paycheck up to 2 days before it officially cleared. That practice exposed a massive gap. Traditional banks were placing holds on direct deposits for anywhere from 1 to 5 business days, sometimes even longer, without giving any clear notice to the account holder. Millions of people found out about that gap the hard way through steep overdraft fees on money they believed had already landed. The second pressure came from a sudden surge in direct deposit fraud. Scammers began targeting HR portals and payroll systems, intercepting the routing and account number change process, and redirecting employee paychecks into accounts the employee never opened. That massive volume of fraud triggered regulatory attention at the federal level. The result was 3 separate rule updates touching 3 entirely different parts of the direct deposit process. They didn't all come from the same agency, they didn't all take effect on the same date, and none of them were announced in a way a regular account holder would ever actually notice. That's the key point. Nobody tells you these rules exist unless you happen to be sitting across from someone whose job it is to inform you. Before we dive into each rule, let's cover the quick takeaways for everyone listening. If you're a lower income account holder living paycheck to paycheck, these rules hit you the hardest because a single hold on a direct deposit can trigger a domino effect of overdraft fees, returned payments, and a damaged banking relationship. All 3 rules we're covering have specific protections built in for that exact situation. And if you're a more comfortable account holder with a financial cushion, you aren't exempt either. The offset rule has no income floor, and payroll verification gaps create serious fraud exposure regardless of your balance. That brings us to rule number 1, the new hold time disclosure requirement. Under the Expedited Funds Availability Act, federal law has required banks to make direct deposit funds available within specific timeframes for years. The practical enforcement problem was that banks were placing holds, often citing exceptions in the law that allowed extended holds under specific circumstances, without giving adequate written notice to the account holder. Regulation CC, which governs funds availability, explicitly requires that when a bank places a hold exceeding standard next business day availability for direct deposits, it must provide written notice. Not a verbal explanation at the teller window, but a written notice delivered at the time of the hold stating the specific reason and the exact date the funds will become available. Updated enforcement guidance now puts real teeth behind that requirement in 2 key ways. First, banks that place holds on electronic payroll direct deposits without providing written notice are subject to examination findings and civil money penalties through the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB. Second, and this is the part that directly impacts you, if your bank placed a hold on your direct deposit without proper written notice and you incurred overdraft fees during that hold window, you have legitimate grounds to request a full refund of those fees. The bank won't advertise this, and there is no form mailed to you automatically. You have to ask for it. The trap that costs people money is a common assumption. Most people believe their bank is allowed to hold whatever it wants for however long it wants. That assumption is wrong, and the banks know it's wrong. Regulation CC under Title 12 of the Code of Federal Regulations specifically governs this. Every time a bank places a hold, it is operating under federal law, and federal law strictly requires that notice. To see how this works in real life, consider a woman named Patricia. She's 58 years old and works as a licensed practical nurse in Columbus, Ohio. Her bi-weekly paycheck arrives by direct deposit every other Friday. Last spring, her bank placed a 3-business-day hold on her paycheck, citing a new account exception even though she had held that account for 11 years. No written notice was provided over that weekend. Consequently, 3 automatic bill payments processed and all 3 were returned for insufficient funds. Patricia was charged a $35 overdraft fee 3 separate times, and 2 of the payees charged their own return payment fees on top of that. The total cost to Patricia for money that was already legally hers was $172. Patricia did nothing wrong. The takeaway on Rule 1 breaks down clearly depending on your situation. If you're a lower income account holder, the protection is direct. Any hold placed without written notice is a procedural violation that you can challenge in writing to recover your fees. If you're a more comfortable account holder, your risk is lower but not zero. Extended holds on unusually large direct deposits, year-end bonuses, or government lump sum payments still happen and still trigger the exact same notice requirement. One more critical detail worth knowing: Regulation CC also distinguishes between reasonable cause holds and standard holds. A bank invoking reasonable cause is legally required to have specific, documented grounds tied directly to your individual account, not just a blanket policy applied automatically to every account. If your bank cites reasonable cause but cannot produce a specific reason when you ask, that is worth reporting directly to the CFPB. The action step to close out this section is simple. Contact your bank in writing, not by phone, and request a copy of your account's current hold policy for direct deposits. Ask specifically what the standard availability timeframe is for your account type under Regulation CC and what exceptions the bank is authorized to apply. Save that response, as it serves as your baseline if a future hold generates fees you need to dispute. That leads straight into rule number 2, which is where misdirected money stops being recoverable if you don't take action quickly. Rule 2 is the payroll verification and routing accountability update. The fraud pattern I mentioned earlier became severe enough that the National Automated Clearinghouse Association, NACHA, which governs the ACH network, processing virtually all direct deposits in the U.S., issued updated rules placing greater accountability on payroll processors and their clients. The specific update requires originating financial institutions and payroll processors to implement account validation before initiating a direct deposit entry. In plain terms, they must now verify that the routing and account number receiving the direct deposit actually belongs to the intended recipient before any funds leave. Practically, this means 2 major things for you. First, employers and payroll processors are now held liable when fraud occurs through unvalidated routing changes in a way they weren't previously. Second, every single ACH direct deposit transaction now carries a trace number, a unique identifier that allows the transaction to be tracked end-to-end through the processing system. Under updated NACHA rules, that trace number must be made available to the account holder upon request. Most employees have never asked for it, most HR departments have never mentioned it, and most payroll companies don't volunteer it. But it exists for every single paycheck that has ever hit your account via direct deposit, and it is the single most important tool for resolving a misdirected or stolen payroll deposit quickly. The common mistake that costs people weeks of recovery time works like this. When a paycheck goes missing, whether from fraud or a simple data entry error, most employees call HR first. HR calls the payroll processor opens an internal support ticket, and weeks pass with no resolution. The correct approach is to contact HR while simultaneously reaching out to your bank's ACH dispute department. Provide them with the expected deposit amount, the expected settlement date, and a formal request for a trace on that specific transaction. Armed with the trace number, your bank can contact the receiving institution directly through the ACH return process. Without it, the return process is significantly slower and often stalls out completely. Rule 2 serves different account holders in distinct ways. If you're a lower income account holder, a misdirected paycheck isn't just an inconvenience, it's an immediate crisis. Having access to the trace number protocol means your path to resolution is much faster and doesn't require waiting around on your employer's internal bureaucracy. If you're a comfortable account holder, your primary vulnerability is fraud. Direct deposit redirection scams specifically target larger balance accounts because the payout is higher and the owner is less likely to check the account every single day. The new validation requirements add a layer of protection, but knowing the trace number exists and how to request it is your ultimate enforcement tool. Right now, pause for a second and look up your most recent direct deposit, not last month's statement, but the actual transaction sitting in your account today. Note the date it settled and the exact dollar amount, and write those two numbers down. When you contact your payroll or HR department this week, those are the exact pieces of information you will use to request the ACH trace number for that deposit. That trace number should take your employer no more than 24 hours to retrieve from their payroll processor. If they can't produce it, that failure alone is worth escalating to your bank. Your action step for this section: contact your HR or payroll department in writing and request the ACH trace number for your most recent direct deposit. Keep a running record of every trace number moving forward. Furthermore, if your employer uses platforms like ADP, Paychex, or Gusto, each of those systems provides a trace number lookup feature directly inside the employee portal. Log in and find that record before your next paycheck arrives. One additional update worth noting: NACHA has also expanded its same-day ACH processing windows, which works directly in your favor. More payroll processors are now capable of settling direct deposits same day rather than next day, meaning your money spends fewer days floating in limbo where a hold could be applied. It doesn't eliminate holds entirely, but it shrinks the window banks have to justify one. If your paycheck seems to be clearing faster than it used to, this is why. It's well worth asking your payroll department if they've adopted same-day settlement, as it alters how quickly you can expect your funds to clear. This brings us straight to rule number 3, which isn't about what your employer or bank is doing to your deposit, it's about what the federal government is legally authorized to do with it. That is the part most people were never warned was coming. Before we dive in, here is something important you should do. I have put together a guide covering the exemptions, breaks, and refunds that most seniors already qualify for but fail to claim. I've organized them all in one place, state by state, form by form, so you don't have to spend hours digging through confusing government websites. Everything is laid out clearly and simply, so any senior can find exactly what applies to them. No matter which state you live in, there is money you might be leaving on the table. It's called the Senior Exemption Playbook, and you can find it in the first pinned comment right below this video. Just tap that link and you'll have everything you need. Now, stay right here, because this final rule involves the largest dollar amounts that people fail to challenge, and it's the core reason I made this entire video. Rule 3 is the government offset expansion under the Treasury Offset Program, TOP. Operated by the Bureau of the Fiscal Service within the U.S. Department of the Treasury, this program is the federal government's mechanism for collecting delinquent debts by intercepting payments that the federal government itself issues. Even before recent expansions, the program was already capturing federal tax refunds, Social Security payments, federal employee wages, and federal contractor payments to satisfy qualifying debts. Those qualifying debts included defaulted federal student loans, unpaid federal taxes, and state income tax debts referred by participating states. What has changed and what matters most for anyone receiving direct deposits right now is the expanded scope of debts that now qualify for referral, along with the speed at which offsets occur once a debt is submitted. State agencies have dramatically expanded their participation. More categories of state-level debt, including certain municipal court fines, state benefit overpayments, and past due child support, are actively being referred to the federal program, even from states that weren't historically active participants. Once a debt is referred to TOP, the offset is entirely automatic. No court order is required, and the government does not have to sue you. The funds are intercepted before they ever reach your account, or immediately upon arrival, depending on the payment type. Every Social Security recipient needs to understand this key threshold. Under 31 U.S.C. Section 3716, Social Security benefits subject to offset are protected up to a floor of $750 per month. Any amount above $750 is fully accessible to the offset program for qualifying debts. For example, if a recipient receives $1,400 a month in Social Security, $650 of that monthly payment is exposed to offset once a qualifying debt is referred. Crucially, that $750 floor does not adjust automatically for inflation. It is a fixed statutory limit that hasn't changed in years, meaning it protects less real purchasing power with every passing year as prices rise. For working adults receiving paycheck direct deposits from a federal employer, the offset authority is even broader, and the floor calculation works differently. Federal wage offsets under the program are governed by the same disposable income calculation used in standard wage garnishment, 15% of disposable pay per pay period, or the amount by which disposable pay exceeds 30 times the federal minimum wage, whichever is less. This is also where federal tax refunds come into play. As many people don't realize, a tax refund is simply another direct deposit passing through the exact same offset system. If you are expecting a refund and have a qualifying debt on file, the IRS will not send you the full amount and expect the other agency to collect from you separately. The Bureau of the Fiscal Service intercepts the refund before it ever touches your account, applies it directly to the debt, and mails you a notice afterward explaining where the money went. Unlike Social Security, there is zero floor protection on a tax refund, meaning the entire refund can be absorbed to cover a qualifying debt in a single transaction. Now, for the part that catches people off guard who believe they owe nothing at all. Debts referred years ago can remain sitting inside the offset system long after you assume the matter was settled. A student loan you thought was discharged under a repayment plan, a state tax balance you assumed was resolved, or an overpayment from a federal benefit program that was never formally closed out, all of these can sit in the Bureau of the Fiscal Service database indefinitely and trigger an automatic offset without any new warning. To see how this plays out, consider Gerald. He is 67 years old and a retired postal worker in Memphis, Tennessee, receiving both a federal pension via direct deposit and Social Security. 3 years ago, Gerald entered into an informal repayment agreement with his state's Department of Revenue regarding a tax balance from his final year of self-employment income. He made payments for 8 months and then stopped, believing the balance had been cleared. It hadn't. The state had referred the balance to the federal offset program before Gerald's payments even began, and that referral was never officially withdrawn. Without warning, Gerald's next federal pension deposit was reduced by $412. He received no advance notice beyond a single letter that arrived 2 days after the money had already been taken. Gerald did nothing wrong. He had a payment arrangement in place, but the referral was simply never recalled. That is precisely how the offset system operates. Here is how this impacts you based on your situation. If you are a lower income Social Security recipient, that $750 floor exists specifically to protect you. Knowing it exists gives you the power to challenge any offset that drops your monthly benefit below that threshold. If a collection action has reduced your monthly payment below $750, that offset is improper and can be formally challenged through the Bureau of the Fiscal Service dispute process. If you are a higher income account holder receiving federal pay or a federal pension, your risk scales directly with your earnings. The 15% calculation means higher earners lose significantly larger dollar amounts per pay period once an offset becomes active. The mistake that worsens the situation: when people receive an offset notice or notice an unexpected reduction in their direct deposit, their immediate instinct is to call the agency they believe owns the debt. That call almost never resolves the issue quickly. The offset was executed by the Bureau of the Fiscal Service, not the creditor agency itself. Calling the creditor agency cannot stop an active offset. Only a formal dispute or an official referral withdrawal submitted directly through the Bureau of the Fiscal Service will pause the program. Reaching out to the wrong agency first simply wastes crucial days or weeks you can't get back. This brings us directly to your action checklist for this week. These steps are specific, and you can execute all of them on your own without hiring a lawyer. Step 1. Search the Bureau of the Fiscal Service Offset database. Go to fiscal.treasury.gov, navigate to the Treasury Offset Program section, and locate the top call center number at 8-003-043-107. Call that number and provide your Social Security number. The automated system will inform you whether a debt has been referred under your record and which agency submitted it. Do this before your next direct deposit arrives. If a referral exists, you need that information before an offset occurs, not after. Step 2. Request a pre-offset notice review. Under 31 U.S.C. Section 3716, the referring agency is legally required to send you written notice prior to submitting a debt to the offset program. That notice must state the amount of the debt the agency's intent to collect via offset and your right to inspect and dispute the debt. If your funds were offset and you never received that pre-offset notice, that represents a procedural defect. Contact the referring agency in writing and request documentation proving that proper notice was sent, including the date and delivery method. Retain that written request and any response you receive. Step 3. File a formal dispute if the debt is incorrect or already settled. While each referring agency manages its own dispute process, every dispute must ultimately be confirmed through the Bureau of the Fiscal Service to stop an active offset. When you contact the referring agency, request written confirmation of your dispute and ask them to submit an official referral withdrawal to the Bureau of the Fiscal Service if your dispute is upheld. Obtain that withdrawal confirmation in writing before your next pay date. Step 4. Confirm your protected floor if you receive Social Security. If your payment has been reduced, calculate whether the remaining amount is above $750 per month. If it falls below that threshold, contact the Social Security Administration Offset Coordinator at 800-772-1213 and state explicitly that your benefit has been reduced below the protected floor under 31 U.S.C. Section 3716. That is the exact legal citation. Use it. Step 5. Establish a secondary account for your direct deposit. This is a crucial structural move. Opening a second account at a completely separate financial institution and routing your direct deposit there, rather than into your primary spending account, doesn't eliminate offset exposure for federal payments, but it creates a practical boundary that limits the impact of bank-initiated holds or account-level actions during a dispute. For state-level garnishments, which follow a separate legal track, that separation buys you procedural time to file a dispute before your main spending account is touched. Additionally, check your state's specific exemption rules, as several states exempt a portion of direct deposit funds from private creditor garnishment when held in accounts designated specifically for payroll or benefit receipts. Step 6. Document every single direct deposit moving forward. Maintain a dedicated folder, either physical or digital, containing your bank statements showing each direct deposit, the ACH trace number for every paycheck, any hold notices from your bank, and all correspondence with the Bureau of the Fiscal Service or creditor agencies. If a dispute ever progresses to a formal review, that documentation is the exact difference between a quick resolution and a drawn-out struggle. A simple habit that makes all of these steps much easier. Turn on real-time deposit alerts through your bank's mobile app. Set them to notify you the exact moment a direct deposit posts and the moment any hold or reduction is applied. Most banks provide this feature for free, yet hardly anyone enables it. Without real-time alerts, you might not notice a short deposit until days later when you're looking at your balance, forcing you to reconstruct events from memory rather than catching the issue on day one. One additional detail worth understanding: offsets are not the only way a federal payment can be reduced. Voluntary allotments, garnishments for federal debt collection outside of TOP, and administrative wage garnishment tied to defaulted federal loans all operate through slightly different channels, each with its own notice requirements and dispute windows. If your deposit changes and doesn't match the exact scenarios described here, don't assume you're at a dead end. The same underlying rule applies across all of them. Someone was legally required to notify you first, and if they failed to do so, that is your opening to push back. It's also vital to understand how this impacts joint accounts. If your direct deposit lands in an account you share with a spouse or family member, an offset or hold can still be applied to the entire balance in many states, not just your individual portion, depending on how the account is titled. If you establish a secondary account specifically to receive direct deposits, opening it as a single owner account rather than a joint account keeps the legal separation much cleaner if a dispute ever arises. The common thread connecting all three of these rules is simple. The institutions processing your direct deposit, your bank, your payroll processor, and the federal offset program are each operating under specific legal obligations to you. Your bank must notify you of holds in writing. Your payroll processor must provide trace numbers upon request. The Bureau of the Fiscal Service must ensure the referring agency issued proper advance notice before executing an offset. None of those obligations enforce themselves. Every single one requires you to ask, to document, and to push back in writing when necessary. Nobody hands you an explanatory pamphlet when you open an account. Nobody in HR walks you through ACH trace numbers, and the offset program won't call to warn you before intercepting your money. That is simply how the system was designed, and it is no accident. Every single one of these rules places the burden of knowledge on you, the account holder, while leaving administrative authority with the institution. Knowing about the written hold notice requirement, the ACH trace number, and the Bureau of the Fiscal Service dispute process puts you in a completely different position than you were just a few minutes ago. That isn't a minor detail. It is the direct difference between Patricia paying $172 she never owed versus keeping her money, or Gerald watching $400 disappear versus challenging an invalid referral before his next pay date. A question I receive constantly is whether closing an account and opening a new one elsewhere makes any of this go away. It does not. Holds are tied to how new your relationship is with a specific bank. So closing an account and opening a new one can actually trigger brand new account hold exceptions rather than avoiding them. Offsets are tied to your social security number and the underlying debt itself, not to a specific bank or account number. So moving your money to a different institution will not remove you from the Bureau of the Fiscal Service database. The only thing that truly resolves any of these issues is navigating the dispute process directly, using the exact citations and contact steps we just covered. You now have the rules and the actionable steps to protect your money.